Before meeting Jamie, my life was pretty ordinary. I was focused on building my career, spending most of my time working on innovative renewable energy systems. Social interactions were limited, mainly revolving around work or occasional gatherings with close friends. My routine was steady, predictable, and mostly solitary. The change came when I decided to attend a friend's wedding, despite usually avoiding large social events. That's where I met Jamie, a lively and competitive woman who immediately caught my eye. We clicked right away, and our shared ambitions, despite our differences, brought us closer. Jamie's energy and drive complemented my more reserved and thoughtful nature, making us a balanced pair. By the time our story begins, Jamie and I had been married for 6 years. I vividly recall the officiant at our wedding, surrounded by 300 guests, 7 bridesmaids and groomsmen, and $20,000 worth of flowers asking, "Do you, Jamie Elizabeth Snowden, take Blake William Benson to be your lawful husband, forsaking all others until death do you part?" Her affirmative response, accompanied by a loving look, felt like a promise of fidelity. I made a similar commitment, gazing at her with the same sincerity. I've always believed Jamie and I make a great team because we share similar life goals and interests. Yet our differences keep our relationship dynamic. Jamie's lifelong involvement in sports showcases her competitive spirit, whereas I prefer a more laid-back approach, favoring consensus over competition. Despite my athletic build, I've never pursued sports with the same passion. Jamie is also more outgoing, forming numerous casual friendships, while I, an ambivert, enjoy social activities but prefer a few deep, meaningful connections, reflecting my upbringing in a wealthy, well-mannered family. Jamie received an excellent education from one of the best colleges in the eastern United States and landed a job as a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company. She got this high-paying job not only because of her education and intelligence, but also her appearance. It seems that Big Pharma wants attractive people to call on hospitals and doctors, perhaps to distract them from the fact that they are being coerced with money. In any case, since Jamie is 5'7" tall, weighs 120 pounds, has long blonde hair, a winning smile, and sparkling, almost neon green eyes, she was very successful, so much so that she secured the right to sell pills in her territory. Jamie explained, "The reason why my territory requires me to be away from our luxury apartment 3 nights a week, or occasionally on weekends, is related to the fact that the main pill I was responsible for had a limited but very lucrative market. Although I don't fully understand this, I don't like that she's gone 3 nights a week, not to mention some weekends. I'm lonely and crave companionship. In any case, I often skipped the evenings when she was away, going to the movies, ball games, or bowling with male friends. But mostly, I stayed at home and watched TV. My job doesn't require travel. In fact, I almost never have to leave my condominium if I don't want to. I sell proprietary computer software and hardware online that makes renewable energy systems much more efficient and seamlessly integrates them into the electrical grid. In fact, I have invented and patented products that I sell and can manage software from my powerful computer in my home office, only needing to supervise equipment production in the suburbs of the large city I live in for a few hours a week. Since I'm home often during the day, I know most of the neighbors, which is uncommon in most American apartment buildings, where you only see others at monthly meetings. Other residents tried to persuade me to become president of the condominium association, but I managed to resist. However, I agreed to handle the association's accounting. In our condominium, there are 4 duplex apartments on each of the 2 floors, and a single-level apartment on each floor. The duplex apartments have an office and 3 bedrooms, as well as a kitchen, large living room, and 3 large bathrooms. Single-level residences have a small living room, kitchen, bathroom, powder room, 1 bedroom, and a small closet. A single-level unit, 5B, next to our entrance, 5A on the 5th floor, is rented by a woman who looks too young to afford the rent for an apartment in our luxury building. I'd guess she's 23. Jamie and I are only 29, so I think a lot of people in the building think the same about us, especially since we own our apartment rather than rent. The young woman's name is Cecile Wilson. Most residents are not home during the weekdays, so they are unaware that Cecile is at home most of the week and often receives 2 to 4 visitors a day, all men. Cecile's appearance and the flow of male visitors led me to conclude that Cecile was most likely a high-priced call girl. Although I had my suspicions about Cecile's profession, I didn't bring it up with her the dozen or so times I saw her at the pool or the health club the first year she lived in 5B. For two reasons. One, she doesn't bother anyone, so I don't care what her profession is. And two, it's not something to discuss in casual conversation. What is Cecile's appearance, you ask? Surprisingly, the first year she moved into 5B, I only saw her wearing makeup twice that I recall. At the pool, she usually wore a conservative one-piece suit, and at the gym, she wore overly bulky shorts and t-shirts. In the hallway, or when she walked to and from the lobby, she almost always wore pants and a long-sleeve shirt. In public, she usually wore her long, shiny brown hair in a bun, and often wore bulky black glasses. Although I was sure she had 20/20th vision, the lenses looked like regular glass. She clearly tried to hide her natural beauty when she wasn't with clients, but she couldn't completely disguise her magnificence. Cecile has an almost perfect face, large bosoms that even conservative outfits cannot hide, extremely long legs with hips that any artist would gladly try to reproduce on canvas or in stone, and a backside that matches her sculpted hips. She is almost 5 feet tall and slim, but not too skinny. My relationship with Cecile was pleasant, if not exactly close. During that first year, we knew each other's first and last names, always smiled, and said hello when we passed by. We had several casual conversations during workouts or at the pool, and once we ran into each other at the local Kroger and spent 5 minutes discussing how to best prepare and serve organic vegetables. She was a health enthusiast, not just about exercise, but also about food. That all changed one Thursday around 1 p.m., a day when Jamie was out of town and was due back on Friday around 6 p.m. I was leaving my apartment to make one of my weekly short trips to the equipment manufacturing plant when I heard screaming in apartment 5B. This was very unusual, especially since the apartments are very soundproof. I listened at the door and didn't like what I heard. It sounded like the man was slapping the woman. I knocked on the door. "Superintendent, open up!" It was quiet for a few seconds, although I thought I heard sobs. Then a deep male voice said through the door, "Screw off, we don't need anything." "Open the damn door, or I'll call the cops," I replied, still hearing the sobs. A big guy opened the door and yelled, "It's none of your freaking business. Get the screw away from me and my girlfriend." He was going to say something else, but when I saw Cecile on the floor and what looked like blood, I didn't let him finish. On my keychain, I have a cheap self-defense tool. I don't even know what it's called, but it's a very hard piece of plastic, with a straight part with holes for the fingers, 2 rounded ends that extend beyond my hand when I hold the straight part, and a stub with an enlarged head that goes between the 2 fingers. The guy was taller than me, although I am 6'2", and probably 30 pounds heavier, so I took the tool in my right hand and strike him with all my might in the mouth with the enlarged head of the stub. He backed away as I moved towards him and punched him a second and then a third time. The third time he tripped over Cecile's prone body, struck his head on the marble floor of the foyer, and was out cold. I helped Cecile up, led her to an easy chair, and closed the front door. She had a black eye, was bleeding from her nose, and had scratches on her arm and leg. She was wearing a negligee, and despite my best efforts to focus solely on helping her, I couldn't help but notice her phenomenal bosoms and otherwise fantastic body. "Are you okay?" was my first stupid question. "Can I get you something?" "I'm hurting right now," she moaned, and then taking a deep breath, she continued. "I'll be fine, but could you get me some paper towels for my nose and a cold compress from the freezer?" I quickly complied with the request, and while she applied a compress to her eye, I wiped the blood from her nose. "Who is this a-hole?" I asked, nodding my head towards the guy lying on the floor. "An angry customer," she muttered. "We should call the police," I said, finishing with her nose. "No cops," she answered quickly. Over the next few minutes, we repeatedly discussed calling the police, but it was clear that she did not want to, likely because she didn't want their attention due to her profession. Finally, I gave up. "I have an idea. I don't want him to think he can do this again. Do you trust me to take care of him?" "Yes, as long as it's not in my apartment," she muttered, wincing in obvious pain. I quickly went to my apartment, grabbed a couple of zip ties, a bottle of water, a bottle of booze, and for the first time, it was useful to be married to a pharmaceutical sales rep. Besides the money Jamie brought in, I grabbed some sleeping pills from her stash of legal pills. When I returned, I turned the huge guy over and tied his hands behind his back with the zip ties. Then I rolled him onto his back and splashed cold water on his face. He woke up, I picked him up, he was too heavy to carry. I took the keys out of his pants and led him downstairs. I asked him to point out his car, sat him in the driver's seat, and convinced him that the pills were painkillers that would make him feel better. I helped him take the pills with water and then talked to him, trying my best to convince him never to come to our building again until the pills took effect and he was already on his way to La La Land. I poured booze into his mouth. He passed out, and I cut the ties, put them in my pocket, started his car, and locked it. I then called emergency to report a drunk sitting in a stopped car in our parking lot. I didn't wait for the police to arrive, but went back up to Cecile. Cecile's door was still partially open, so I knocked and opened it further. "Cecile, this is Blake. Can I come in and see how you are?" I heard her mutter. "Of course. Come in now." She was sitting on the couch, wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants over her negligee, her head thrown back with one compress on her nose and another on her eye. "Let me take a look," I said when I was next to her. Then I carefully removed her hand and the compress from her eye. It didn't look very good. "I think you should let me take you to the emergency room," I said sternly. She began to protest, but I said in an even more stern voice, "Cecile, I'm not a doctor, but your eye needs to be examined. I'm taking you to the emergency room, and you have no choice. Where are your shoes and purse?" She obediently pointed them out to me. I put her shoes on her feet. "Damn, even her legs are great," flashed through my head when I did this, and we walked slowly. When we got down to the building, I led her away from the police. They had smashed the front passenger side window, turned off the car, pulled the guy out, and loaded him into the van just as the tow truck pulled up. On the way to the hospital, I called my production team and said that I would be late. I helped Cecile register at the hospital, confirmed that she had health insurance, and then gave her my business card, which included my cell phone number. "Call me when you're done. I'll pick you up and take you home," I told her, handing her the card. "You've already done too much." "You don't," she began to say when I interrupted her. I carefully placed the card in her hand. "No, listen, call me. You may need to stop by to pick up your medication. Call me and I'll be here in 10 minutes. "I have no urgent business today," I said. "Okay, thank you," she said, trying her best to smile weakly. Then I patted her on the head and left. I was just finishing work at production when my cell phone rang. "Hey, Blake, this is Cecile," came a relatively strong voice on the other end, stronger than when I dropped her off. "Are you ready to leave?" I asked. "Well, yes, but I can hail a taxi if you're busy," she continued. "I'm not busy," I answered cheerfully. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. The traffic is a little worse than usual. Just wait in the emergency room and I'll come pick you up, okay?" "Thank you," she replied quickly. When I picked her up, she had a bandage over her eye and cotton in her nose. We stopped at the pharmacy to buy her pain pills and ointment. And then I brought her back to the apartment. "How about I bring you something to eat for dinner?" I said as she sat down on the sofa. "You don't have to." "I want to," I interrupted her again. "I'll eat alone if I don't. How about chicken fingers and fresh vegetables?" I saw her hesitate, and then remembering our discussion at Kroger, I added with a big smile, "Everything is organic." She laughed as much as she could. "What if I come with the food already prepared at 6 o'clock? Does that sound good to you?" She smiled faintly. "Here, so you don't have to knock on the door. Just come in," she said, handing me the key from her purse. I brought food, a bottle of wine, and a large bottle of seltzer, and at 6 o'clock in the evening, I entered Cecile's apartment using the key she gave me. Only then did I take a moment to look around her place, having previously been too concerned about her condition. The apartment was sparsely but stylishly decorated, with several clearly original paintings. They weren't Van Goghs, but they were fun and well painted. Cecile was sitting at the kitchen table, her greeting and smile much stronger than when I left her 3 hours earlier. While we ate, we chatted about nothing in particular. "I can't drink wine with the painkillers I'm taking," she said as I poured her a glass. I stopped pouring. "Sorry, I didn't think about that." "It's not allowed, but I need a couple of glasses." She grinned, nodding for me to pour more, which I did. "You're not going to take advantage of me if I fall into a trap, are you?" she asked with a semblance of a smile. "Then I'd be worse than that a whole. But I don't want to because I'll have to carry your back to your bed. So don't pass out." I chuckled. "I'll try not to do that," she replied. When we finished dinner and I cleared the table, I noticed two things. She did have some kind of reaction to the combination of pain pills and the glass and a half of wine she had drunk. Although she was still mostly sane, she suddenly wanted to have a serious conversation. "You probably think I'm terrible for entertaining men," she said, not looking me in the eye and sipping from her glass of wine. "Of course not. How you earn your living is your business if it doesn't infringe on my rights." I answered sincerely. How long ago did you realize that I work as an escort? She asked, this time making eye contact with her one eye that wasn't covered. About a month after you moved in, I replied dispassionately, sipping my glass of wine. You and your wife, what's her name? Jamie. Are you and Jamie talking about this? She asked. Never. Jamie doesn't come here often, as you've probably guessed, and it's not something we could talk about anyway. I don't gossip, and I certainly wouldn't speculate on the profession of a good neighbor. After some more conversation, where she was feeling me out and unloading, she said, You're the only straight guy I've known since I've lived here who hasn't hit on me. Why? Because I take my marriage vows seriously. More than 90% of my clients are married, she replied. But I'm not one of them. If you're wondering, physically, you are the most desirable woman I've ever seen. But I don't know you well enough to know if I'm compatible with you, and I've never been into just a physical relationship. I need emotional attachment to have the sexual experience I want. So if you're offended that I didn't hit on you, don't be... She didn't say anything in response. She just looked at me with her one good eye for a good 30 seconds. You know, despite the number of clients and the physical nature of my business, I am lonely. I have almost no friends. My type of business and hours of work preclude this, at least for the people I would like to interact with. After that, we had a painfully direct conversation about her personal life. It ended with me asking, So what is your ultimate goal in life, Cecile? Ultimately, I want the same thing as you. I want to have a spouse and eventually even children. I want someone to be my one and only, for me to be faithful to him and for him to be faithful to me. I'm saving enough money so that I'll be financially independent by the time I'm 30, and then I'll move out, give up this life, and try to find the right man. But my plans are temporarily on hold, because until my eye, nose, and these scratches on my limbs heal, I won't be working. An idea suddenly came to me. Tell me how you feel about working for me, I began to say when she suddenly flushed. What? I thought you were different, she said in a high-pitched voice with tense muscles and an expression of disbelief on her face. Let me finish, I laughed. Realizing this wasn't something to laugh at, I quickly said, I'm not trying to hire you for sex. I need help filling out paperwork. I'm hopelessly behind and keep putting it off. This is something that even a cyclops can do if he puts his mind to it. But I can't pay your normal rate, I continued, now that she had relaxed and even giggled at my cyclopean joke. $700 an hour, $2,500 for a full night, $4,000 a day on site plus expenses, she muttered, before catching herself, blushing, and putting her hand to her mouth. I can't pay $700 an hour, but I can pay $25 an hour and offer free food now and then until you're healed, she giggled. On Monday, show me what you want me to do and I'll let you know. After another 20 minutes of small talk, it was clear she was exhausted, so I gathered my things. She hugged me, whispering, "Thank you very much," in my ear. I kept my distance. As to my chagrin, I was getting aroused. I patted her on the head and left. Despite the excitement at the end, I found it a lovely evening with a friend. No real sexual connotations. I liked her as a person and never thought that she might be lonely. On Friday morning, while I was working in my apartment, there was a knock on my door. "Hi, Blake," said a smiling Cecile, dressed in her usual conservative clothes. "Hello, Cecile. Are you feeling better today?" I asked cheerfully. "It still hurts like hell, but I'm in a better mood." She chuckled. "You probably want your key back," I began to say, reaching for the key on the table in the foyer. "No, why don't you keep it in case I need to be rescued again and the guy doesn't answer the door? I'm here because I hate to ask for more help after everything you've done, but I desperately need groceries and the doctor has forbidden me to drive with my blindfold and pain pills. Can you take me sometime today?" "Of course," I smiled broadly. "How about in an hour, 1:30? "Great," she giggled, clapping her hands. "Just knock on my door when you're ready." Cecile and I had a great time grocery shopping. I think this was the first time in my life that grocery shopping was actually fun. While I don't hate the activity, I've never particularly enjoyed it. I had fun with Cecile, especially when she humorously talked to the vegetables, imagining they were people. The following Monday, Cecile came to my apartment shortly after Jamie had left for work. I showed her how to fill out all the different papers that were lying around my office and even in the living room. She was very conscientious, not fast, but it was the first time she was filling out paperwork, so accuracy was more important than speed. We had lunch together, worked some more, and then I took her to the pharmacy to buy some things she needed. Thus began my friendship with Cecile Wilson. I think I was the only male friend Cecile had since she was 18, Every other man she met wanted to sleep with her, and that was his sole purpose for communicating with Cecile. It's not that I didn't find her attractive. She was the most alluring and sultry woman I've ever met. But I was married, I took my vows seriously, and I had other attractive women as friends in the past, so I didn't see Cecile as just a sex object. With Cecile around, the nights and weekends when Jamie was out of town were no longer lonely. With Cecile, I always had something to do, even after she was completely healed about a month later, and looked as good as before she met that guy. And since her regular work schedule consisted of morning and afternoon hours on weekdays with the occasional overnight or out-of-town stay, we did almost everything together. On those evenings when Jamie wasn't around, I encouraged Cecile to attend parties and meetings sponsored by the condominium association and made sure she had a good time. However, I realized that I couldn't take her on outings with my male friends. They were too busy either trying to hit on her or drooling to be good company. So, she and I mostly went alone. She seemed to enjoy it. Even when she started working as a call girl again, she insisted on helping me with the paperwork. I soon discovered she had greater intellectual curiosity and intelligence than she had been given credit for most of her life. So I encouraged her and started teaching her about my business. When I tried to pay her for help, she always put forward some conditions. For example, a swim in the pool or how much time we could study in the office for double payment or nothing. More often than not, I ended up paying nothing, which seemed to make her happier than when I paid her double. I found Cecile to be one of the most honest and kind people I've ever met. She spent about 10 hours trying to find the owner of a small handbag with no ID, but nearly $100 in cash that had been lost at the pool. She eventually succeeded. She told me about a client who developed health problems during sex, and she took him to the hospital and gave him his money back despite his protests that she should keep it. She cried when she couldn't save a little bird that crashed into the window in the lobby of our building. She found a lost puppy and returned it to its owner, refusing a reward. She tipped the paperboy extra, never gossiped or said anything bad about anyone, and never acted rudely or meanly even when boys hit on her. About 8 or 9 months after Cecile and I became best friends, she surprised me by showing me an application for admission to the local community college. "I want to get an associate's degree in business administration," she announced with a wide grin on her face. "Can you sometimes help me with homework?" "Of course I can," I said. "I'm so proud of you." She was absolutely delighted by this comment and ran up to me and hugged me tightly. Every time she did this, I had to make sure my lap was at a distance from hers. But I'm afraid this time she hugged me so long and tightly that she must have known about my arousal. But neither of us paid any attention to it. I was pleasantly surprised that as Jamie learned more about my friendship with Cecile, she didn't become jealous. I think this was due to several factors. First, Cecile and I never showed our affection in public. In private, we never did more than hug or kiss chastely on the cheek. The second reason was that we developed a great cover story for Cecile's profession. Third, Cecile began helping Jamie with paperwork, for which Jamie was very grateful. Fourth, I convinced a longtime gay friend of mine who wasn't open, but I'd known he was gay since high school, to serve as Cecile's boyfriend at condo association parties, and even go on occasional double dates with Jamie and me. Of course, there must be a problem. Life is never smooth, as it has been for me the last 2 years. On Sunday morning, after a phone call, Jamie had to rush out of town on business and was much more distracted than usual when she left. As she hurried out, she pulled out a jumbled pile of documents from her briefcase, placed them on the coffee table, and asked if Cecile could sort them into folders. I answered, "Certainly." I was very disappointed with Jamie's quick departure because that day we were supposed to go apple picking, which happens once a year, and I really enjoyed it. Shortly after Jamie left, I sent Cecile a text. "Jamie left on the bus. Want to pick apples this afternoon?" She quickly replied, "Let's go at 11 or any time after 2, okay?" A happy expression appeared on the screen. We had a great time picking apples and eating apple cider donuts, even though several college guys tried to look down Cecile's shorts as she stood on the stairs and stared at her in the donut shop. That evening, we had dinner together at my condominium and planned to watch a DVD afterward. But before I put the disc in the player, Cecile asked, "What is this?" Reaching for the pile of papers Jamie had left in disarray on the coffee table. "Oh, these are the papers that Jamie dropped off in a hurry and asked if you could process them before she returns on Wednesday evening," I replied dispassionately. "Of course," she replied, trying to gather the papers together so she could pick them up. While she was doing this, something fell from the stack onto the floor. I was busy loading a DVD and only noticed something had fallen when I turned and looked at Cecile's face. She was holding what looked like a photograph in her hands and had a completely traumatized expression. "What is this, Cecile?" Nothing," she said quickly, placing the photo back in the center of the stack. Cecile would never be a professional poker player. Her face clearly showed that this was not nothing. I approached her. "Let me see what you were looking at." "No, it's nothing," she answered, trying to slowly leave the room with a bunch of various papers in her hands. This made me even more curious. I carefully took her hand. "No, I really want to see this. What's the big secret?" When I freed her from the load, she sank onto the sofa and buried her face in her hands. About halfway down the stack, there were 3 6x9 photos, each of which featured Jamie unclothed and with a different guy, making out with her, having sex, and she did it on camera. I sank onto the living room carpet. 2 photographs and the rest of the pile of papers fell to the floor, and I sat stunned with the 3rd photograph in my hand. "I'm really, really sorry," Cecile said, putting her hand on my face. I looked at her, stunned. "Maybe these are old photos from before you got married," she said, trying to find something positive. "She only got a butterfly tattoo on her left shoulder 2 years ago," I muttered in response after a long pause, during which Cecile asked if there was anything she could do. I finally said, "Cecile, I need some time alone to process this. Even though you are my best friend, I don't want to talk to anyone right now. Please." I'm sure there were tears in my eyes. I know Cecile did too when she hugged me just before she left. After half an hour of crying, I slapped myself and said in the mirror, "Action, not pity, you weakling." I ran around the house like a whirling dervish, looking in all of Jamie's dresser drawers, the boxes she kept on closet shelves in several different rooms, and her office files. One of her desk drawers was locked, so I opened it. I found at least a dozen incriminating pieces of evidence. The question wasn't whether Jamie cheated on me, but for how long and with how many different guys. I went through many stages of anger, humiliation, irritation, and shock. The only constant theme was how could I be so damn naive? I didn't sleep that night. On Monday, I looked and felt like hell. I didn't get much work done, and I had even less luck deciding what I was going to do with Jamie. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard a knock on the door. It was Cecile with a pitcher of margaritas, which was quite surprising because I'd never had more than one at a time in my life, and I'd never seen her drink more than one either. Cecile burst into my apartment. "Listen, stud," she said, putting the jug on the coffee table. "I canceled my meeting for today. I called your production assistants and told them you wouldn't be working this afternoon. We're going to get drunk as hell, and tomorrow you will decide what to do with your little wife." I started to protest, but it was no use. Throwing all of Jamie's papers that had fallen on the floor the night before except for 3 photographs towards our fake fireplace, I took the glass Cecile was holding out to me and took a sip from it. God, it burned. Cecile was focused on making me not only drunk, but also happy. After an hour of hilarious stories and 6 drinks, maybe more, I lost count, she finally succeeded. I passed out before it got dark outside for the first time since I graduated from college 7 years ago. I was lying on the floor next to the sofa, and Cecile was lying on the sofa with one of her arms hanging down and touching me. After a while, I began to hear ringing in my ears. After the 3rd time it stopped and started again, I realized it was the landline phone. I stumbled towards it and saw on the caller ID that it was Jamie's cell phone. I unplugged the telephone, returned to the sofa, moved Cecile over, and fell asleep, cuddled up to her. Cecile and I woke up together in the middle of the night, probably around 4 in the morning. Her first comment, made with a mischievous smile, was mind-blowing. "You're the first guy I slept with who didn't screw me, Eliminator." I started laughing. "When you look at yourself in the mirror, you'll understand why." "Broomhilda," I muttered. "You're not a prize yourself." "To be honest, I can't tell if I'm talking to your face or your back, a-hole," she replied, laughing hysterically. We both got up, went to the bathroom, drank some water, and then fell asleep next to each other, fully clothed on the covers in the master bedroom. I woke up around 8 o'clock to the smell of bacon and eggs. I stumbled downstairs to the kitchen. "Breakfast for 2, Cecile said in a sing-song voice. "I thought I'd have to light a stick of dynamite to wake you up." She laughed. I felt like crap and cringed when I saw myself in the mirror. "This is definitely the worst thing I've ever seen in my life," I said out loud. Then I looked at Cecile. She had clearly showered, changed clothes, and put on light makeup. She looked amazing. No one should look that good ever, especially after being hungover the day before. "I hang out with you because of your charm, not your looks," she grumbled while turning an egg. "Now sit down and try to hide your face behind the cereal box so I can have breakfast in peace." I didn't realize how hungry I was until I started eating. The food was delicious, and I inhaled it almost as much as I ate it. "I'm glad to see that a man appreciates my cooking," Cecile laughed as I finished the third egg, 200 grams of bacon, and the fourth piece of toast. "Are you going to finish this bagel?" I asked, pointing my empty fork at the buttered bagel quarter sitting on Cecile's plate. She laughed and tossed it onto my plate. It disappeared down my throat in seconds. After Cecile put away the dishes and loaded the dishwasher, she took my head in her hands and looked me straight in the eyes. "I'm busy today and have an overnight stay, but I'll be here tomorrow afternoon. Let me know if there's anything I can do. But you have some real decisions to make. And before you do anything hasty, you need to talk to Jamie in person. Do you hear?" "Okay," I muttered, nodding my head several times to emphasize the point. Cecile kissed me chastely on the lips. For the first time, she kissed my lips. You're disgusting," she giggled. "Shave, shower, and brush your teeth before you do anything else." I laughed, nodded, and she left. By the end of the day on Tuesday, I had sobered up, cleaned the apartment, photographed all the evidence, or saved it digitally onto a flash drive. I didn't talk to anyone except my software assistant and my production foreman. My cell phone was full of messages, mostly from Jamie, but also from her parents, and even mine. I didn't want to talk to her, and it was just fine that my inbox was full and my landline was disconnected. I had pretty much decided what to do, but was still working out the details when Jamie burst into the apartment frantically on Wednesday morning, 12 hours before she was due to arrive. I saw it was her and turned away. "Blake, I was so worried," she said with genuine concern in her voice. "You weren't answering your calls, and I was sure something had happened. What the hell could be wrong? My dear faithful wife?" I chuckled with as much sarcasm as I could muster. She turned white and raised her hand to her mouth. Her eyes fell on the papers she had left on the coffee table, now in a neat stack. She began to tremble. "Let me show you my little pile of treats," I said with the same sarcasm, taking her hand and leading her to the evidence laid out on the kitchen table. "Maybe you can explain this crap," I barked. After several deep, choking sobs, she began to babble. "Blake, I love you. It didn't mean anything. I got so competitive and wanted to be number one in sales. I just made a few business deals. I'll stop, I promise. We have to get through this. You are the only one for me. I will get pregnant and we can start a family," etc., etc., etc. Finally, I snapped. I walked into the master bedroom, grabbed all of her clothes from the closet and dresser drawers, not caring what state I left them in, and threw them all into the guest room. Some things fell on the bed, most on the floor. Jamie stood in the hallway sobbing and then fell to her knees. When I was done, I went into the kitchen, found the lock I had bought the day before at the hardware store, and installed it on the master bedroom door while she continued to sob and repeat, "No, no, no." Once the bedroom and my office, which already had a decent lock, were secured, I left. First, I went to my production site, then to lunch, and then to the cinema. I returned to the apartment around 11 in the evening. Jamie was sitting on the sofa in the living room. She looked terrible. Her mother and sister were there. "Why are you here, Candace?" I asked irritably, looking at my mother-in-law. To me, she was a typical condescending rich witch. I always tried to be friendly to maintain some semblance of peace between us. "No more, Blake," she said, clearly taken aback by my attitude. "Jamie's sister Sherry and I want to offer any help we can to help you get over Jamie's mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed. "Is that what you call it? Did you show your mom the photos, honey?" I asked Jamie sarcastically. She lowered her eyes, avoiding eye contact. "You know what you can do, Candace? Make Jamie screw those 34 other guys she had sex with, and then we can talk." I went into my bedroom and locked the door. Surprisingly, I slept well that night. When I got up the next morning, Jamie was gone. There was a simple note. "I've decided to go see Mom and Dad until you calm down and we can talk some more. Don't throw away our future, Blake. We can get through this. Love, Jamie." On Monday morning at her parents' house, Jamie was handed divorce papers. There were 2 sets. The first proposed divorce by mutual consent, dividing property 50/50ths due to irreconcilable differences. The second asked for a divorce on the grounds of infidelity, accompanied by 5 pieces of evidence that left no doubt. My simple note read, "I haven't filed any of these yet. Take your pick. I need to hear from you by 9 a.m. tomorrow. If I don't hear from you by then, I'll submit application number 2. Have a nice life. On Monday evening, around 6 o'clock, there was a knock on my apartment door. It was Cecile. "Let's go eat pizza. My treat," she said with a wide smile. "I don't," I began to say, but she immediately cut me off. "You don't have a single excuse not to go. Let's go." "Okay," I said. "I need my wallet," as I started to walk back to the apartment. "No, you don't. I'm treating you. You only need the keys." She smiled, took my hand, and pulled me out of the apartment, picking up the keys from the table near the door and handing them to me. We ate at our favorite pizzeria with all organic ingredients, of course. Cecile tried to be as cheerful as possible, which helped a little, although I was still sullen compared to my usual demeanor when I was full. Since we were in a secluded part of the restaurant, she took my hand and asked, "Have you decided what you will do?" "Yes, I sent her 2 sets of divorce papers today, one conciliatory, the other hostile, and told her it was her choice. I'll serve one of them tomorrow morning." "No chance of reconciliation?" I thought long and hard about this. I just can't forgive or forget. Loyalty is very important to me, and it's obvious she doesn't care about that. I don't even intend to talk to her anymore. Cecile continued to look between my hand and my eyes. Finally, she spoke. "When your divorce is final, I want to get you first." "What?" I asked, sure that I had not heard her correctly. "You're my best friend. Plus, I'm in love with you. As soon as we go on our first date, I'll quit my current job. I'm confident I can find another job, and I don't care if it doesn't pay a penny. I have enough savings to last until I get you, and I will if you give me a chance." I was stunned. I had no idea that Cecile was actually in love with me. She interpreted my silence as restraint rather than shock. I wondered how she didn't realize that not only would I give her a chance, but I would fall madly in love with the goddess who was already my best friend. Just the thought of sex with this incredible woman suddenly made not only my manhood tremble, but my whole body. "I know you probably won't want to have an ex-call girl as your girlfriend, but I promise you won't regret it if—" "Shut up!" I barked. Then I stood up and kissed Cecile hard on the lips. After a couple of seconds, she understood. She rose from her seat, and we kissed passionately across the table. When we finally parted, I sat back down. "If you're crazy enough to be in love with me, let me tell you my plan. We keep our relationship as is until 2 weeks before my divorce is final. At that point, you quit your job, I sell my condo, and you break your lease. The day the divorce is final, we go to a resort for a week, and if after that you still want a relationship, we move to another part of the country, rent an apartment together, and if you're still crazy enough to want me, we get married." Cecile put her hands to her mouth and began to cry. We held hands as we walked back to our apartments. I had never felt so alive, and Cecile was practically glowing with delight. We kissed passionately, and I didn't care that my hardness was pressing against her before she went into 5B and I into 5A. We looked at each other with big smiles until the doors closed. That night, I knew I wanted our plan to work more than anything else I had ever wanted in my life. However, I expected complications, and the first one came when Jamie's father, James, called at 7:50 a.m. Hearing his voice made me tense. "Hello, Blake. This is James Snowden. I was hoping I could get Jamie an hour off your 9 o'clock deadline so we could meet. The meeting won't change anything, James. Blake, you have nothing to lose. If after an hour-long meeting with me, you still want a divorce, I guarantee that Jamie will choose the irreconcilable differences option, and things will move forward quickly. Please, you owe me this." I didn't owe him a damn thing, but considering how I wanted my relationship with Cecile to develop, speed was crucial. "Okay, when will we meet? I can be there in half an hour." "See you then," I said, hanging up. The meeting with James was useless, except to confirm that he had no idea what I was really like. He tried to convince me of how economically beneficial it would be to stay married to Jamie and how rich I would end up being. He did everything he could to keep me married. He even offered me $2 million in cash and promised that Jamie would sign a postnuptial agreement, guaranteeing me another $2 million if she ever cheated again. Sorry, James. You did everything you could for your little girl, but there will be no deal. I'm still trying to understand why she wants to stay married. I would assume she'd be happy if I didn't get in her way. Cheating wasn't her style, Blake. She just lost focus on what was important. Sorry, I won't do that. Don't forget to ask her to deliver the signed papers to my lawyer this morning. James looked sad when he left, perhaps not because he was getting rid of me, but because his little girl had to go to a psychiatrist. Finally, the day came. The divorce was final. Both Cecile and I moved out of our apartments after 10 days. I sold my apartment and all the furniture in it, except the computer equipment Jamie didn't need, and Cecile's 30-day lease was up, so she sold her furniture too. I almost completely completed the sale of my business's hardware to my employees. Jamie did not appear in court, only her lawyer for the final hearing. I showed up only because I wanted to get my hands on a copy of the resolution immediately. After the trial, I knocked on the door to apartment 5B, my luggage packed for the trip to the resort. I expected Cecile to be ready to go. She was indeed ready, but not for the trip. She was unclothed, except for her high heels and ankle bracelet. "We have time to get to know each other better before we go to the resort. Besides, I don't think you can handle a 2-hour drive," she giggled, pointing at my hardness. Cecile dragged me by my tie into her apartment. Since her bed had already been taken by her customer, the couch cushions lay on the living room floor. While we were kissing passionately, she unbuttoned all my clothes, took off my shirt, pulled down my boxers, and worked on my hardness. Meanwhile, I enjoyed massaging her large, perfectly shaped bosoms. Then I took off my shoes, got out of my pants and boxers, and without taking off my socks, began to work on her honeypot. It tasted and felt even better than it looked. She climaxed after a while, and I was still caressing her body. She muttered, "Now make love to me." As I took her, she kissed me, wrapping her magnificent thighs around me. And then something unique happened. She began to contract her pelvic muscles powerfully. As a result, I quickly reached the climax. A few seconds later, her muscles tightened even more, and we both screamed and shook. I don't know if I lost consciousness, but I was definitely delirious. Cecile held me tightly. Finally, I came to my senses completely, rolled onto my side, and felt a delicious impulse in my spine as my hardness left what was now its favorite place in the world. I looked up into her face. She smiled widely. "Those were the first 2 real climaxes I've had since I can remember," she chirped, still grinning. "Do you know why?" "Because finally, we got dressed. I loaded our suitcases into the car, and we drove off. On the way to the resort, Cecile snuggled up to me until we had driven for about an hour. Then she pulled away. "Blake, I have 4 things to tell you. I have to do this now before we continue. Ready?" "Ready," I smiled. "First of all, my name is not Cecile Wilson. I'm Barbara Godden, Babs for short. I have a full set of fake IDs, good enough to sign a lease and buy a car. If things work out between us, I intend to completely rid myself of my old identity and cut off all contact with my 4 years as an escort." "Wow. You could work for the CIA," I whistled. "You are very good at hiding your identity. Should I call you Babs now?" "Don't call me Babs until you're ready to put a ring on it, as Beyoncé sings," she chuckled. "Okay, Cecile, what's the next revelation?" "I stopped working as an escort the day I told you I loved you, and I accelerated through a community college program. I finished my freshman year and have 3 credits for my sophomore year." "This is fantastic," I answered sincerely, "and not just for one reason. You are full of surprises. Not finished yet?" she grinned. "Thirdly, I came up with a new concept for an online business that I would like to open. I'll suggest this idea to you after our visit to the resort, and if you like it, we can work 50-50ths. I can't wait to hear about it," I smiled. "Finally?" "Fourthly, and this is the only thing that makes me tense," she sighed and seemed to blush. "If you have questions about my work as an escort, you should ask them this week, and I will answer them honestly. After this week, I don't even want to think about it anymore, and any mention of it will make me very angry. So if you have questions, ask them this week." It was obvious that the topic made her nervous. Since I had long ago decided that I didn't care about her past profession, although I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I was very glad she stopped working as an escort over 2 months ago, I had nothing else to think about. I wanted to ask her, but I couldn't leave her hanging. So I came up with what I thought was a clever answer. After an appropriately long pause, I said, "I really only have one question, and I'll leave it at that." She looked at me expectantly. "You said you charged $700 an hour, right?" "Yes," she answered hesitantly. "Now that I've made love to you, I wonder why you charge so little. You should have charged 100 times more." She smiled widely, kissed my cheek, and then rested her head on my shoulder. That was the last time we talked about this. Our stay at the resort was phenomenal. I'm sure no one had a better honeymoon, although technically we didn't have a honeymoon. For me, it was all kinds of fun like snorkeling, swimming, jet skiing, hiking, playing beach volleyball, archery, drinking with my best friend, and then dancing, hugging, and kissing a goddess. That's not even counting the Zex, which was truly otherworldly. The only problem I had after 7 days was that my man's tool and tongue were so sore it hurt. But it was a contented and satisfied pain because I was the happiest I had ever been. After the first day at the resort, when we fell asleep in each other's arms after fantastic lovemaking, I decided that I would propose to her, which I did on the 5th day. She said yes. I would have gotten married the day after we left the resort, but since Cecile Babs had never married and had a few relatives she cared about and wanted to be around, we waited 3 months and had a small but perfectly proper wedding ceremony and reception in our new city. Within 9 months of moving to a new city, Babs earned an associate's degree in business administration. We worked together in my software business, and 3 months later, we launched her new business using a patented system she came up with to maximize promotions on the internet using hybrid recognition of search queries. Now, 3 years after launching, we have decided to sell her business for a 7-figure sum because she needs to focus on something else. Babs, my best friend, Zex goddess, and love of my life, is pregnant with twins.